5 years ago today, the Nintendo Switch released, which makes this date very special because that means it is officially the 5-year anniversary of Joy-Con drift.
You will just keep on running. So let's see if we can do that again. There we go. I'm just going to keep on running without my hand on the analog stick.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause for Nintendo. 5 years of this bullshit. Now, if somehow you're not familiar with Joy-Con drift, it's pretty aptly named. It's a phenomenon where the sticks on your Joy-Con will just randomly start to, well, drift. You can have your hands completely off the sticks and you'll experience happenings where, like, your character will just start moving on their own. It can pull you in a different direction while you're holding the stick in the opposite one, like you'd be pulling it right and the character would be moving left. You could be moving in a direction and let your hand off and your character just keeps kind of floating that way. It's just a whole hot mess. This has been a serious problem for the system since day one. Many would argue it is the most significant drawback to the Switch. When I did my video a while ago saying, I believed the biggest failure of the Nintendo Switch was the incredibly weak retro game support, the idea that the Switch, the best system ever made for retro games, since you can play everything in handheld mode or docked, has way worse retro support than the Wii, even the Wii U. To me, that's just the most insane thing about it, but when I put out that video, I had a lot of people being like, no, you fat idiot, Joy-Con drift is the biggest failure of the Nintendo Switch, which I totally see that argument. I don't know what me being fat had to do with it. I don't think you guys really needed to point that out. But yeah, you've got these little controllers that they look small in the hands of an infant. They cost an insane amount of money, and at any point you could encounter this issue that basically renders them worthless. Like, you can't use a controller that's just randomly spazzing out. I mean, imagine going to buy a car, and the salesman goes, yeah, you gotta be careful, every now and then this car is just gonna randomly turn left. Other than that, though, it's great, nice stereo, low miles and everything. Like, yeah, that's not gonna work for me, dude. And Nintendo has been ridiculously unresponsive about this Joy-Con drift situation since release, which, again, now we're 5 years into the system's life. That's pretty impressive how much they've been able to dodge around this whole thing. They've got, like, troubleshooting repair submission forms for Joy-Cons, but they make it a point to avoid acknowledging this main issue themselves. They've got multiple, I believe, lawsuits going on right now over this issue. And again, when asked directly, they dance around it, being like, oh, well, we always want to improve our products or whatever. And I get part of that is because of the lawsuits. Like, they're not going to flat out say it, but if this wasn't an issue to begin with, or they actually fixed it, there would be no problem here. So it's like it still comes back around to them allowing this to happen and drag out for so long. Thankfully, there are plenty of smarter people than me on the internet. Let's be honest, most people in general are smarter than me, but that have their own guides how to repair Joy-Cons yourself that are drifting without, like, sending them into Nintendo, waiting 15 years or whatever to get them back. You'll sit through 2 generations of Nintendo systems waiting to get your Joy-Cons back so you can play Animal Crossing, and by the time you get them back, your town will have gone to shit, there's going to be weeds everywhere, everyone will have left, it's a nightmare. So as with many issues in the gaming industry, you have to rely on the fans to kind of fix these big companies' problems for them, and I see people use that as an excuse, obviously fanboys, defenders of Nintendo that just love everything they do. They'll go, oh, well, if your Joy-Cons drifting, you can fix them yourself, there's guides or whatever. Which, yes, but again, I'm not trying to buy $70 controllers just to have a DIY project. When I buy a controller, I just want to take it out of the box and use it. Not worry about having to take it apart, rebuild it from scratch. I'm not Spawn Wave. Okay, I don't want to take it apart, look at all the components. Oh yeah, you're going to remove these 4 screws, pull this panel off, you'll see a circuit board in there. You want to be careful not to breathe too heavily on it. I don't care. I just want to play video games. At this point, I honestly doubt we'll see this issue get completely resolved on the current Switch. Like, Nintendo just doesn't seem to care enough about it. It's certainly not hurting their bottom line. Hell, I'm sitting here bitching about it, and I still bought the extra stupid, expensive Zelda Joy-Cons that came out for Skyward Sword. I hate Joy-Cons, my hands are too fat to use them, and I don't even like Skyward Sword, but I still bought them, because I'm that much of a Nintendo whale. But as we look more and more towards the next generation of Nintendo, the next system is almost surely coming within the next 2 to 3 years, I'd say. It will almost surely build on the Switch concept. I think the Switch is something they're going to kind of stick with. So if that is the direction they want to continue in and they're set on improving it, this is one aspect Nintendo should absolutely be focusing on. Fixing this has to be a top priority. Whether it be improving the Joy-Cons or doing something completely different, something has to be done. You know, I try to reinforce this whenever I can that I am a big Nintendo fan, despite what some may think. I do believe many things about this company is top tier. I think their games are the best. In terms of exclusives, I honestly don't think the PlayStation and Xbox are even close. Definitely not this year. I mean, Nintendo is going to obliterate both of them in 2022. I think both in terms of quality and sales. You got high quality stuff, the Kirby's, the Bayonettas, stuff like that coming out. But also two Pokemon games? We just had Arceus doing big numbers. You think Scarlet and Violet, something that's going to be better positioned in the holidays, actually kind of comes off as that core deal with the two versions in that? Think that's not going to sell like hotcakes? So yeah, I think the Switch will go down as one of my favorite systems of all time, but it's so many of these stupid, small things that feel like they should be solved pretty easily or at least by now. Yeah, you expect there to be hardware issues with systems at launch. Even that, in my opinion, isn't very acceptable because, you know, people are paying you a lot of money for this hardware at launch. But, you know, people do have the mindset of, oh, well, I'm going to wait while they work all the kinks out. This was a major kink that was there day one and should damn well have been worked out by now. 5 years is more than enough time to solve these problems. I should not have to be worried about dropping $70, $80 on some dumb, fancy limited edition Joy-Cons, thinking they're going to start drifting one day. I'm going to have to either send them into Nintendo for God knows how long, or perform the operation on them myself, which, I mean, that's at that point, they're pretty much toast. No, it's just ridiculous. In fact, if Nintendo did want to earn back some goodwill with the player base, with so many of the awful practices they've been up to lately, the shitty online service, flagging down videos with their music, if you even hum a Nintendo copyrighted tune, you better be ready to suffer the consequences. They could just come out and at least openly acknowledge this issue. Again, they don't have to be so specific. They don't have to call it Joy-Con drift. They don't have to say your sticks are drifting. You can be like, oh, well, you know, we're aware with control stick issues with the Joy-Cons. We're working to improve them for future iterations and obviously actually get it done. I think it's a problem that has at least gotten better over time, but it's certainly still happening to people. And it's just not okay, not 5 years in. And yeah, I mean, this is Nintendo we're talking about here, so I don't know. I don't think it's likely they're just going to do this out of the goodness of their hearts. Maybe if some of those legal issues, lawsuits become a problem, they'll have to, but they've gone 5 years, mostly ignoring it, so here's to another 5. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on this big anniversary for Joy-Con drift in the comments. Have you experienced it yourself over the past 5 years? Would you like to see Nintendo improve it with the Switch, or at least, you know, a Switch successor? I guess, do you expect them to, is a better question. As always, I'm the Shy Guy, Johnny Zakari, and thanks for watching.